If you were to ask me what my absolute favorite genre of music is, I'd probably have to go with heavy metal. It's heavy, it's metallic, what more could you ask for? Now before we start going over today's subject, I like to stress that I'm not going to go into too much detail about what heavy metal is, as there are countless documentaries on the subject that go into more detail than I can. Instead, we're going to be talking about one of the most underrated subgenres, quote unquote, of metal that I think should get more recognition. I am, of course, talking about proto metal, the subgenre considered by many to be the very beginnings of heavy metal as we've come to appreciate today. So what even is proto metal? Proto metal refers to the hard rock music that helped form the aggression and stylings of traditional heavy metal and, well, metal as a whole. There are three bands in particular that shone the light on just how much heavier rock and roll could get, those being Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath. The three bands' influence took the world by storm, and soon there was a fairly large assortment of bands trying to take those sounds and push them even further. The time period I'm going to go over specifically is the early 1970s, 1970 to 1974 to be exact. So without further ado, let's take a trip into the fascinating world of early 70s proto-metal. First off, we'll be discussing the more underground bands that were more blues influenced, but nonetheless pushed themselves further than your typical straight-ahead blues bands. Just to keep it consistent, I'm going to be showcasing previews of exactly 5 songs per year and only one band per song, aside from one exception as you'll soon find out in the video. We won't be talking about Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Cream, or Deep Purple, as they're not underground in terms of proto-metal standards. Although some of the songs in this video might be familiar to some of you, I mostly want to bring up the more overlooked gems in the subgenre. Now I must stress that not every song on these albums is adjacent to heavy metal, so obviously we won't be talking about those. Also, I will not narrate over every single song unless I feel I have something fairly relevant to say about it. Up first is the Scottish band Tear Gas with their album Piggy Go Getter. Now not all of the songs on this album are heavy, but there are some songs that are no doubt adjacent to early 70s heavy metal at the time. Think of something like Black Sabbath, except way more bluesy, but heavy enough to be in the proto-metal family tree. If you understand what I'm getting at here, I don't know, let's just play it. Now, I know what you're thinking. But stick with me, and I think you'll be surprised at some of the other bands we'll be talking about. Now, when it comes to early 70s heavy rock, I'm honestly surprised no one in the proto-metal community ever talks about this one certain song by the name of Introduction by the band Michael Turner in Session. Let's take a listen. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for my money, that's about as metal as 1970 proto-metal ever got. When I first heard the song, I was floored knowing it came out in 1970, and as I was listening to it, I couldn't help but to think of Judas Priest's song Electric Eye. Not the guitar riff, but the similar tempo and the main vocal melody. If you heard it, you'll know what I mean. It's in the same sort of realm, if you will. But let's look at some more hard rock bands from 1970 to see just how deeply rooted in the burgeoning heavy metal style they were. Iron Claw's single Saga is another great example of how extremely harsh and outright brutal and crushing the guitar and bass tones could get in the early 70s.
Once there was no man only
The next song is Clown on a Rope by Fresh Blueberry Pancake. And according to some guy on YouTube, this was one of the first down-tuned to C proto-metal songs ever made. Big news for Sabbath fans, I'll say indeed. Let's keep going. Now, it was around this time that one of the most underrated bands of the early heavy metal scene and heavy metal in general began to show off their own crushing contributions. The Welsh band Budgie formed in 1967 and eventually recorded their first demo in 1968. For those of you who are keeping track, this predates Black Sabbath's debut album in 1970. The only problem, of course, is that this demo is sadly nowhere to be found. But in 1971, they released their first single, Crash Course in Brain Surgery, showcasing their ability to combine brutal bass with almost gargantuan guitar tones. And if you listen closely, there's even a clean rhythm guitar playing through the left side, which is pretty interesting to combine with this mix. This band is going to be the one who, as I said earlier, is the exception to my only one band rule. I feel as though they left a decent enough impact on metal as a whole for me to cite their examples more than the others. And if you don't believe me, I think bands like Metallica, Van Halen, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden definitely would. How about some proto-metal thrash from 1971? You think I'm joking, but listen to this. I think that speaks for itself. Now, the intro to the next song, Sorrow by Blues Creation, is very interesting due to the fact that it sounds like the galloping pre-Iron Maiden-esque Budgie song Napoleon Bonaparte 2 from 1975. Holy moly! Iron Maiden style galloping from 1971? Who would have thought that would have happened? I guess Iron Maiden really weren't all that progressive now that I think about it. I mean, hell, they still aren't. Anyway, let's keep going.
Can't sleep at night. Grab your telephone. Something ain't right. That's evil.
We've even got some proto Diamond Head in this song. Here, we start to see the genre get increasingly heavier, and we'll kick off this year with the return of Budgie. The track Stranded is booming with thick bass and gritty guitar, and is one of the heavier affairs on their album Squawk. Next up is one of my favorite bands I found when I first got the idea to make this video, Sudden Death, with their only album, Suddenly. The gritty fuzz tone combined with the thumpiness of the bass and drums is honestly something to behold. According to some sources, they were also dubbed America's answer to Black Sabbath. Well, amongst others anyway. Hey, you guys want to listen to a kind of pre-Motorhead type of song from this year?
No one knows the way that I feel. Life today is so unreal. All my time on white flag. Well, leaving over, I called you back.
Let's keep going.
Say it was suicide, yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought of hanging, but I knew it was wrong. Everyone, come with me, leave your world, come and see. Do the things you like to do, come with me for eternity.
Now, 1973, as you'll come to hear, had a very interesting shift in terms of heavy metal. The genre started getting much doomier and faster, more in line with previous bands like Black Sabbath, with a pre-Motorhead flavor than any blues act before them. We'll be starting off this year of heavy metal with arguably one of the fastest and heaviest bands of this type of proto-metal, Blast, with their only released single, Damned Flame/Hope.
I believe in being beautiful, like I'm the judge of the beauty. Then I die and now I believe in the right. Then flame, oh my dear.
Holy fucking shit. See what I mean? That was pure Motorhead before Motorhead was even a conceived thought. Hell, maybe even proto-Dead Kennedys. But that's a different genre entirely, so I'll just have you all pretend I didn't mention them here. Now, as I mentioned before, this year started getting a lot doomier, so here's two proto-doom metal tracks from 1973.
And I'm gonna give it all of my heart. The situation is all wrapped up. No more need to be said, oh no.
Speaking of doom metal, here's a band that Black Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi liked and even helped produce their first album.
Skies are red and wings pulsating. Think I'm soaring high above. On the back of a giant bird, a feeling inside like a primitive belong.
Speaking of giant birds,
Giant bird.
I saved possibly the best proto-metal song of 1973 for last. If you remember that Budgie was my exception to the only one band per song rule, you probably know what song I'm about to showcase right here, and for good fucking reason. Let's take a look. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said about Brad Fan that hasn't already been said, so let's just keep going. At last, we've come to the end of the early 1970s. But let me tell you, it was pretty difficult to find the really underground proto-metal bands from this year. Not only that, some of the songs I originally thought about including were a lot lighter in comparison to the songs from the preceding years, like this one. Now, I think it's still a pretty decent heavy metal track in general, but it's not as heavy as I'd hoped it would be. But I think the only non-underground example I will include in this video will pick up the pace in a heartbeat. Let's welcome Her Royal Majesty, Queen, with their song Stone Cold Crazy. This song is often cited as the first thrash and or speed metal song ever recorded, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that. But Queen weren't the only ones doing proto-speed metal during this time. Remember that famous song Ballroom Blitz? Well, here's the same band who did that song doing a speed metal song.
Is this for real? I don't know when I'll be found. Set me free.
How about some proto-new wave of British heavy metal from Australia?
Pretty ladies dancing in a gilded cage. Whiskey and go-go now is all the rage. All the ladies there are, all they have your age.
If that guitar riff doesn't make you think of almost every new wave of British heavy metal guitar riff ever made, then I don't know what will. And now, we shall close off this year and this video with the all-powerful Budgie and the song that inspired a cover by none other than Van Halen.
That's the meaning of life, and I'm in for the kill. I've been knowing, you've been showing, I've been seeing, I never been.
Alright, I think we found some pretty good examples of how heavy the early 1970s proto-metal scene truly was. Now, this video wasn't made to try and convince you that all these songs are full-blown heavy metal, although some of them pretty much are if you think about it, but rather to start up a conversation about this forgotten era of heavy music and to shed some light on those who I feel truly deserve more recognition in the proto-metal community. We already know about Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath, so I wanted to shed less light on them and more on the underground scene. I've even made a playlist of every song included in this video so that way you can listen to them in their entirety and come to your own conclusions. Link in the description. I hope you enjoyed this semi-deep dive into the world of proto-metal, and I also hope you find some of these hidden gems to be good enough to add to your playlist or something. And if you want, spread them around as much as you can, as I think we should really give the early 1970s hard rock scene a new, heavier look. Thank you for watching.